supplements is a wacky topic and there's so much information. A lot of it not really that true misinformation, or just based on whatever is out there. Lots of different folks giving their 2 cents. I like to base mine on data. As you can tell, if you have my book, I have, like 300 peer-reviewed sources in there. It's an almost 400-page book, just chock full of information based on primarily peer-reviewed sources, my own research, my own results, both personally and with treating thousands of patients over the years, and my experience with them, my family, my loved ones, all those I really care about. So it's actually, the book is based on real data. So if you haven't grabbed it yet, please, please, please jump on over there to Amazon, grab my book, Preventable: 5 Powerful Practices to Avoid Disease and Build Unshakable Health. And I'm going to share with you a little bit more. I just kind of teased you last week with a little bit on supplements, whether or not we should waste our money on these things. Are we making expensive urine? Like, what's the deal? Well, there are kind of just a couple. It's kind of a short list. I could be supplementing with thousands of things like Dave Asprey, for example. I don't do that. Like, hey, Dave, I think you're an amazing dude. We're the same age, and I'm all about the biohacking, but I'm about doing it simply, doing it right, not having to pay thousands of dollars to buy this gadget or that gadget, or, buy a daily this or that. I mean, I'm all about keeping it simple. And I would love to actually, chat with him or anybody else that's into this space. It's fun to talk to biohackers. I've had Melanie Avalon on the show. She's amazing. We had a good little chat. She's an amazing gal, super brilliant, and I love chatting with them. And I also just love to share my personal story and what I've used with many other folks, which is actually super, super simple. And the message here, guys, is you don't have to buy a bunch of gadgets. You don't even need a gym membership. Like, heck, you can do what I'm doing. You can stand and you can bounce around throughout the day while you're doing your work calls, be moving about. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this with a broken ankle, but I'm putting my weight on one foot. I'm kind of hopping. I'm holding on to my desk. This one is kind of a standing desk. It's actually a regular desk, but I have this kind of mini little podium desk that I put on top of it. So it's fairly stable. I'm holding on to it. I'm not going to fall over, even though, as you can see on YouTube, I do have my crutches in the background there if I need to grab them. But little simple things done daily that are available for the masses is what I'm all about. I'm not about making you spend thousands of dollars a month on a gym membership, a lengthy list of supplements. I keep it super, super simple. Yes, I do spend some money on supplements, but the reason I do that is because what I've realized in my time, both as a physician, as a wellness expert and advocate, is that right now, present day, 2023, the real truth is our soils are depleted. There's so many micro and macronutrients that are just missing in our soil, or they're at such low levels, lower than ever before, because of the farming practices we've been using for the last several decades, even 100+ years. We're stripping the soils of their valued nutrients. We're not doing the regenerative farming on a big macro level like we should be doing. And so present day, you buy even the whole foods that I'm always recommending, right? The vegetables, the fruits, all the colors, the beautiful colors. You're buying your well-sourced proteins. And present day, sadly, they just don't have the same amount of nutrients that they used to have. In fact, I shared with you last week that as early as 1936, this really became sort of broadcast to the world. And there was a whole Senate hearing about this in 1936, about how our soils are becoming depleted. Sadly, nobody's listening. I mean, I guess I'm not surprised, right? Big government's not listening. Most of the big food folks are not listening because they're not getting incentivized to do the right thing. And we all like incentives, right? Everybody likes incentives. Heck, I got 6 kids. I know how much they love incentives. I love incentives. Like, why not, right? I mean, we're not incentivizing the practices that would not only improve our food, but also improve the world. Like, regenerative farming is the way to go. And it's not complicated. It's the way that we always did it. We did it for thousands of years. We let the animals graze on their species-specific diet, which was not oats. It was not grains if you're a cow or a buffalo. No, you never had access to that garbage. It wasn't, of course, the seed oils, the dreaded seed oils, which this sweet gal shared with me. She didn't know of the dangers. We even feed those, sadly, to our animals nowadays. Why? Because it brings them to market quicker more weighty, more fat, more, it's just bigger, and they bring a bigger price, and yet they're way worse for us. They're so much worse for us. So right now, present day, as quoted last week by the great Mark Hyman, who's just a cool dude. If you don't follow him over there on Instagram, he's a cool guy. He's written a bunch of books. He's kind of one of my mentors. He's a smart dude, and he has been quoted to say many times that right now, present day, it's basically impossible to get all of your nutrients, both macro, micronutrients, from the food that you eat. Even if you're eating as clean as possible, organic, everything, growing all of your own food, which, sadly, almost none of us do, including me. I don't, and I look forward to the day when I can grow more of my food in Hawaii. We have access to some local food. We got neighbors that have mango and avocado, and we got banana on the property and papaya on the property and a few things, but I'm not nowhere near where I want to be. I want to be growing much more of my own fruits, vegetables, and if I can one day have appropriate land to be able to have protein that I can allow to be raised in their species specific wild manner, if you will, and to have that protein source, I'm going to do that as well. I was chatting with a friend of ours this morning on how we tried actually in Hawaii to have our own chickens. We didn't do our research. We tried to do the whole egg thing, and we didn't have a dog. And so our chickens were getting eaten by feral cats, and it didn't work out for us. So we're going to get there. we're planning to get more active in this manner. But as you know, many of us know, we move about a lot. We spend a bunch of time in Florida. I've been working in Florida. I'm spending time currently in Utah, which is where my mom is and my stepmom both. And it's so nice to be close to them. And gosh, I love you both. And they're battling right now. They're battling cancer, and just so grateful to be near them. And heck, my mom even reached out to me this week and gave me this boot that I'm wearing. So thanks, Mom. I love you so much. And so right now, present day, it's next to impossible to get every nutrient that we need to function optimally as humans from our diet. Just can't happen, right? Because our soils are stripped, they are depleted. The transportation times in food, the storage times, like holy moly, the amount of time that fruit or that vegetable sits on a shelf or in a refrigerator before it's even brought out to the shelf, before you can actually buy it, could be weeks. It could even be months. And as that time elapses, well, guess what happens to the nutrient percentage? It's going down. It's just not the same as being literally picked fresh that day, which is pretty hard to do unless you're buying from a local farmer's market or you're growing it yourself. So in that case, which is the case with most of us right now, present day in the US and most places in the world, we actually do need supplements, but they should be exactly that. They should be supplements. They don't replace or take the place of a crappy diet. Like, you can't just eat what we usually eat, which is not good here in America, right? It's 67% highly processed or the ultra processed foods. And then just take a bunch of supplements and hope that's going to sort of counteract, if you will, all the crappy foods we're putting in our mouths. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. What's interesting, it does work the opposite way. In other words, when we do have this crappy diet, our body, one of the reasons we eat so much and we are literally overfed in this country, I mean, doesn't take rocket science. I went out yesterday and was hobbling around with my crutches while my daughters were riding their bikes, and I just had to get some air. I was indoors. I was getting a little bit stir crazy. And so I went outside and I saw 4 people walking by, which was amazing because they were outside getting fresh air. And there were 4 adults and 2 kids. And the 4 adults, 4 out of 4 of them were significantly overweight. And I looked at those 2 little kids and I almost cried. It kind of bummed me out because it's not in the genes, if you will. Most of this, despite what the Surgeon General says, despite what these quote unquote experts say on TV, it's actually not true. Most of obesity is actually not in the genes. Most of it is our regulation of the genes, which is everything else that we do or that we don't do, right? It's the so-called epigenetic forces that plays much more of a role in the final product, which is our health, our weight, our ideal body weight or not, and our ideal health or not. We actually are the biggest factor that contributes to that, not the DNA, not the gene pool. And there's been tons of really amazing, remarkable twin studies, and I share about this in my book, And they are just overwhelmingly, I just think they give us so much pertinent information in such a simple study. Like, for example, the study that was done looking at two identical twins, same exact DNA, 100%, they're identical twins, for crying out loud. One of them became obese, the other stayed thin. And they looked at the differences, and it was not in the DNA, right? One big major difference that did actually occur as they looked was that their gut health was very, very different. Their so-called microbiota, the composition of the bacteria primarily that live in their intestinal tract, mostly the large intestine, but the bacteria living there were very distinct, very different from the overweight or obese twin and the thin or lean twin, yet they had the same DNA. And when they took the poop, when they took the stool from these two twins that were genetically 100% identical, they put the stool from the overweight twin into a mouse and a genetically identical other mouse. They put the stool or the poop, they did poop transplants, right? The fecal transplants. Some of the originals were done in mice. They took the poop from the thin or the lean twin, same DNA as the obese twin. They took that poop, that stool, put it in the other mouse or groups of mice, actually, which were also genetically identical. They were actually getting the same feed. In other words, they fed them identically. The only thing that was different, this was what they controlled for, was the poop transplant, the stool transplant. One got the stool from the overweight identical twin. The other got the stool from the lean twin. And guess what happened? Just the stool alone, the one who got the stool from the overweight identical twin became overweight. That mouse became, or that group of mice became overweight. The others who got the stool from the lean twin, they did not become overweight, despite having those two groups of mice exactly the same diet, the same number of calories. This is phenomenal. This is not the only factor of the gut health, but it is a very major factor. But the nutrition is a huge factor too, because if you are starving nutritionally, which many of us are, we may be getting plenty of calories. And I use this dictum a lot. We are overfed and yet undernourished. Our brain, our body is smart. It knows, hey, you're deficient in magnesium, zinc, the omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and EPA. You don't have enough vitamin D. You don't have enough K, K1, K2. You don't have enough of these things. And because of that, I'm going to send a signal right here, this little part of the brain I'm pointing to in the brainstem called the hypothalamus. It's sort of the base of the brain. It's the governing body, if you will, of all of our hormonal signals. It sends a signal saying, hey, we're not getting appropriate nutrition. So we still feel hungry. We want to eat more. And the designers, if you will, the food, actually scientists they're called, they designed food specifically that trigger us to always be hungry. Why? So we'll just want to eat more and more food. And one of the ways that this happens is they just don't have much, if any, nutritional value. And so we're getting lots of calories, but very little actual nutrition. So yet our bodies are starving. They're craving the nutrition, but they're not getting it. So what do? We keep eating. And like in this post I shared a week ago when I was in Mexico, like bags of crazy blue colored and all kinds of crazy stuff, processed food like my kids see at school. The Takis is the one I showed on the Instagram post. And that stuff is crazy that people actually eat that stuff. And my kid actually told me the other day that there's a kid in his class that brings the big bag, and it's basically, it's a giant potato chip, size bag of Takis, and gosh, I would never promote support. I wouldn't buy these things. And parents, like most of us are parents listening to this, or grandparents, or what have you, the buck stops with us. Like, we're responsible. Our kids largely are not buying this stuff on their own unless we're giving them the money to, right? I mean, most elementary school kids don't have a job. They can't just go out and buy stuff. So we are ultimately responsible. The buck needs to stop with us, because when we buy these ultra processed foods, the signaling right up here is basically that we are always hungry. We are always hungry because we're not getting fed the nutrients we need. So one of the things you'll notice right away, and I surely did as I started to supplement with a few key players. I don't take hundreds and hundreds of supplements like some of the biohackers out there. I keep my list fairly short because, one, simplicity, right? Because We all know that the opposite of simplicity, complexity, if you will, as Tony Robbins likes to share, complexity is the enemy of execution. If we want to get something done, we want to do that thing, and it's important, it's a needle mover, we want to do it every single day. It's got to be simple, right? The Keep It Simple, Sweetie, the KISS acronym that I learned as a kid in 3rd or 4th grade. We got to keep it simple. So one thing I love about my regime is it's really, really simple, super simple. And there's a few key players, and I'm going to share with you a little bit out of the book because I just want to tease you a little bit. You got to go out and get the book. And I'm going to read a little bit today, and I'll do a little ad lib too, but I'm going to read a little bit into that same supplement chapter that I did last week. But I'm going to give you a little bit more details. I kind of gave you the prelude. Now I'm going to go into a couple different classes I feel that we as humans can benefit from. These are kind of the low-hanging fruit. These are also, I feel like, the biggest needle movers with respect to if you're going to spend any money on a supplement, focus on these couple of key players because they're going to have more bang for the buck. And so here we go, starting with this, the multivitamins and minerals. And here we go. A good multivitamin is really the cornerstone of a solid supplement regimen. Adding a multivitamin mineral or an MVM helps address any possible nutritional gaps that we may experience. For most of us, the potential benefits will likely outweigh the low risk of this simple intervention. And I quote a study that looks at multivitamins and the fact that they're, by and large, safe to take. They have very low risk, and it's low cost, right? Relatively low cost, low risk method of filling your vitamin and mineral gaps. It's not a panacea, and it can't replace the crap diet that many of us, including me, used to have, right? I used to eat cereal for breakfast, delicious and nutritious. Wheaties were kind of my favorite as a kid, right? It had all the performers on there, it had the Mary Lou Rettons, and all the famous athletes were always on Wheaties. So what did I eat? Hey, I wanted to be like them. I ate Wheaties. Like, I'm going to raise my hand. I was one of the worst offenders. Yes, I ate cereal. Yes, I ate bread from the store. Yes, I ate pasta, like all these things that are basically calorie rich and nutrient poor. I was eating, but I was also not at my optimal health either. Here we go. As with foods, supplements are not all created equal. Again, please remember to read the label. Personally, I try to pick a multivitamin that uses the most bioavailable form of nutrients. This should be a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you pick one that closely resembles the form of vitamin or mineral your body actually uses, right? Though this may seem like common sense, most doctors do not pay attention to this. Case in point, folate. Your multivitamin should contain folate because not only does it help prevent neural tube defects while promoting fetal health, OBGYNs recommend it, for example, it may also help decrease the risk of heart disease, cancer, and other chronic diseases. Folate is involved in the homocysteine metabolic pathway. A deficiency of folate and or vitamin B12, both of which act as cofactors in the breakdown of homocysteine, can thus lead to increased homocysteine if you have a deficiency in folate or vitamin B12. This is a risk factor for vascular disease and blood clots, predisposing one to heart attack, stroke, and pulmonary embolism, blood clot in the lungs. Folate, rather than folic acid, often prescribed, is thus preferable. Folate or methylfolate is the one that our body actually uses and wants to use and wants to have available. Folate or methylfolate, not folic acid, which is the synthetically derived form in the lab that almost all multivitamins have. I make it a habit, I think I shared with you, I'm kind of a little geek this way. I love to check out different nutrition shops around the world. I love to look at their highest quality, top tier vitamins, and it reinforces in me every day that the ones I've picked that I like to use on a daily basis are superior than most all of the ones I find, because one of the things they don't have, especially right here, just thinking of this one thing, folate, is they don't have the bioavailable methylfolate. They don't have it. They use folic acid. And actually, most doctors, including me, when I didn't know this, would often prescribe folic acid because that's what we were told, right? That's folic acid. That's what you prescribe. It comes from a pharmaceutical company, must be good. And it's not as bioavailable, especially those folks that have MTHFR, which is methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. That's a fancy enzyme but it's involved in the so-called methylation pathway, which turns on genes, turns off genes. Super important pathway. A lot of people have a deficiency there due to what are called these single nucleotide polymorphisms, or the so-called SNPs. Now, don't despair. We're not going to get too sciencey right now. I actually did a whole podcast on, I think I called it "What the MTHFR?" Like, what's that? And I talk all about that whole pathway. Super interesting stuff. And so I use a fully methylated form, L-methylfolate, which is generally more useful and bioavailable for most people. This is especially important to consider, given many people have one of the several MTHFR, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase genetic mutations or variants. These are surprisingly common. Therefore, they may not be able to process the synthetic folic acid well. In these cases of MTHFR genetic mutations or variants, which affect a significant proportion of the population, supplementing with 5-methylfolate, shortened from 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, can then increase the active folate and replete the deficiency in the body. On the other hand, using the commonly prescribed multivitamin containing folic acid in this case would unlikely replace the deficit. A lengthy discussion of the MTHFR genetic mutations and variants is beyond the scope of this book, but having your healthcare provider test for the most common ones is prudent, as these can be something that surprisingly affects many people. Just remember, having a methylated folate in your vitamin, like L-methylfolate, not folic acid, is a good place to start. Look for it on the labels. I also look for a multivitamin that contains the active bioavailable form of vitamin B12 or methylcobalamin. Vitamin B12 is essential for healthy nerve and blood cells, DNA synthesis and repair, as well as the homocysteine pathway in health, as we just described. Vitamin B12 deficiency, sadly, is actually pretty common. In my own practice, I found that many people unknowingly are low or even deficient in it. My uncle, for example, who has a great whole foods diet, by the way, he actually eats the rainbows and generally pretty good health, started to have some neurologic symptoms, which were numbness in his feet. He was kind of starting to fall, didn't really feel his body and feet in space, the so-called loss of proprioception, which if you're a little bit of a science buff or a physiologist, you know about this stuff. It's called the dorsal columns in the spinal cord are responsible for this proprioception, knowing where your body is in space. And he was having difficulty with that, primarily with his balance, with walking. And soon after identifying the symptoms, we discovered he had a vitamin B12 deficiency, as he was largely eating a vegan diet. Fortunately, his symptoms were completely resolved after we restored his vitamin B12. So a lot of times you just got to look under the hood. And so this is one of those tests I recommend people get checked for, is your B12 levels, because you just can't guess this stuff. I even had my daughter's B12 levels checked, recently as well. And I'm pretty proud of the fact that hers were well up into the optimal range, not just the baseline normal, but they were up into the optimal range because we do have a fair amount of high quality, well-sourced animal proteins in our diet. And that's where you get largely the B12, because it's just not really in vegan food, sadly. And so if you're a vegan and it's working for you and you're thriving, that's amazing. I actually love so many. In fact, almost all the vegetables I've ever tried, I actually love. I can't, in fact, off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of any that I don't like. But if you never get any other source of protein or other source of nutrients, you might be deficient in vitamin B12. I know those that I've worked with over the years, this is a really common issue. And so you're definitely going to be wanting to supplement. So groups of people, especially at risk for B12 and or deficiency, tend to be vegetarians and vegans, the elderly, those with chronic gut issues, especially malabsorption, or those on chronic acid-reducing medications. Even over-the-counter antacids can cause this, as well as alcohol and alcohol dependency. So having your healthcare provider check your B12 level is a great idea, while I advise you to also get checked for homocysteine as well. If a vitamin is needed, choose the active bioavailable form, methylcobalamin. So here's another one of the the things I love about the multivitamin I take is not only does it have the L-methylfolate, which is the bioavailable form that your body can absorb, that it can use immediately, it also has the bioavailable form of this one, cobalamin, which is vitamin B12, methylcobalamin. Looking for the presence of selenium and zinc in your multivitamin is also an advisable approach because our bodies do not naturally process and store it like it does sugars and fats. We need to get zinc from our food and from supplements. Zinc is useful for numerous things. That is a cofactor in hundreds of reactions in the body. It is important for immune function, decreasing inflammation, its antioxidant properties, healthy skin, eye health, wound healing, DNA and protein production, and numerous enzymatic functions. During the pandemic, it also received news coverage for its benefits in immune function, as well as its role in taste and smell. It may also improve, listen guys, testosterone levels, your T. If it's low, you could be low on zinc. In those with low zinc levels, zinc optimization is essential and can be found in a great multivitamin. All right. Selenium is also an essential mineral with many important health benefits, but it's often lacking in many diets. It's a very powerful antioxidant that supports our metabolism and thyroid function and may reduce the risk of cancer, heart attack, heart disease, and cognitive decline. Many people are deficient in selenium, unless, of course, you are eating a couple of Brazil nuts daily, because these are an excellent source. You may want to have yourself checked for deficiency. In addition to these essential nutrients, I generally look for a multivitamin that contains 100% of the US RDA, which is the recommended dietary allowances of vitamin C, D, E, A, K, hopefully containing both K1 and K2 is a plus, and the B vitamins like thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, pantothenic acid, pyridoxine, and biotin. If your multivitamin mineral supplement contains the US RDA of chromium, which is important for decreasing insulin resistance and for blood sugar balance, manganese, and copper, that's an additional bonus. Most of them, however, do not. And one of the reasons I love this, here you can see it if you're watching on YouTube. This is my wife's cup, and it says Happy Juice. So fun, so fun. But she got this glass cup, and I'm using it because I love to drink out of glass. Oh my gosh, guys, I'm looking out the window. I have seen a deer walk by. What an amazing sight. And this Happy Juice that I'm drinking right now actually does have chromium, which is peer-reviewed, it's evidence-based, has been shown to improve your insulin sensitivity. And insulin sensitivity may be one of the holy grails behind optimal health. Get your insulin functioning optimally, and you will reduce your inflammation. You will improve your energy. You will improve your overall body composition, right? You're going to store less fat. We know insulin is primarily the culprit. Well, it's responsible, if you will, for storing fat. That's what it does, right? It's supposed to get that sugar out of the bloodstream so we don't die of what's called diabetic ketoacidosis, or the hyperglycemia, the high blood sugar causing this acidosis, which can be dangerous, as I know way too well with a child with type 1 diabetes. We don't want to have that. So we need insulin, and we actually have to inject her with insulin each and every day because her body is not naturally producing it right now, though most of us have the opposite problem. We overproduce. We produce way too much insulin because we're seeing too many carbs in our diet, right? And too many ultra-processed foods. And so our insulin is going bananas. In fact, there's so much of it in our system that our body is a little bit resistant to it. It's not working well, but it's doing everything it can to store that glucose or sugar as fat. And so when we dial in our insulin sensitivity and we dial in a really good, happy, if you will, and stable blood sugar level, not only do we feel amazing, have lots of energy, but we also don't tend to store as much fat. And so this is one of my favorite things to actually include in a supplement is chromium. And it's actually the secret sauce behind this drink that I'm showing you folks on YouTube, the so-called pink drink. It has chromium in there. And it's been studied in actually the highest quality, highest level of evidence, the so-called randomized controlled trials, RCTs, in both diabetics and non-diabetics alike, to be able to optimize blood sugar balance. And I'm not diabetic, but I have chromium every day in this wonderful drink. My daughter, who's a type 1 diabetic, has had significant improvement as well. in her blood sugar control, blood sugar balance, because we've added chromium to her supplementation as well. And so just one of those little things that is a big bang for your buck with respect to if you can get it in your multivitamin, fantastic. A little bit additional as well. And many of us, including me, has been super helpful. And that's why I drink this drink. And moving right along to one of my favorite additional vitamins that is a fat-soluble vitamin that is so darn important, like equal on a level of the importance of insulin, is this vitamin called vitamin D, right? The M, the N, and the D that I'm sharing about almost every single day over there on social media, how I love to get in my movement, my nature, and of course the D, which is a little bit of natural vitamin D production, hopefully from the sunshine. It's so critical. I'm going to read this little section from the book on vitamin D for you folks, because vitamin D is paramount. It is one of the most important things that many of us, I would say actually right now, present day in the US, the data support that the majority of us do not have optimal levels of vitamin D. Vitamin D has been one of my favorite vitamins for many reasons. One of the things I love most about it is if you live in a place where you can get adequate sunshine without getting burned, you can potentially get it for free. Out in the sunshine, you can optimize vitamin D in as little as 10 to 15 minutes a day, especially if you're young. What I found is that as we age, especially anybody over 40, we're not likely to be able to do this conversion as effectively. Even me, I spend a lot of the year in Florida, Hawaii, and even when I'm in the mountains of Utah, I'll take my shirt off for a few minutes out of the day to try to soak in some of this ultraviolet radiation to try to transform the D into the active 25-hydroxy vitamin D that is so paramount and useful. But as we age, that process gets less and less effective. So I've seen as a physician many patients that literally come into me and they are tan. I'm like, holy moly, you must be getting a ton of sun. And their vitamin D levels are still low. So it doesn't guarantee it. It's a great start to get a little sunshine every day. Don't overdo it and get yourself skin cancer. I mean, don't do that. I'm not overdoing it, but I love to get out there and get some, but it may not be enough. It may not be sufficient. And this is what I found. Getting outside also has the bonus of fresh air and vitamin N, or nature, as I like to call it, and can dramatically, positively affect your mood and brain health. The benefits of nature are numerous and far-reaching. So during your 15 minutes of outside time while breathing fresh air and soaking in vitamin D, try to access some of them. As I previously mentioned, vitamin D has also received increased press in light of the recent pandemic due to its significant effects in boosting immune health. It is technically a fat-soluble vitamin and acts more like a hormone. Thus, it has a myriad of functions. This vitamin actually goes to the nucleus and helps turn on and off genes. And this little piece I just mentioned, fat soluble, is critical because one of the reasons most folks maybe aren't getting enough or they're not absorbing it as well is because you should take it either alone or with other fat soluble vitamins, for example, like vitamin A, vitamin E, right? K2. I do this actually. I have a couple of sources of vitamin D, and my youngest kids still aren't swallowing capsules. And so I have for them, I have a multivitamin that's pretty robust and it has vitamin D in it, but I also buy these drops that have D3, which is the active form, 25-hydroxy vitamin D, but they also have K2, and they're in kind of this fatty liquid, and you just drop it in their mouth and then they absorb it really well. Or the vitamin D little gel caps that I have, it's kind of like a little oil-based as well. And so likes like, right? If it's opposite, they repel. So you want to have fat soluble. Some of the, so-called enthusiasts out there or biohackers, they even take their fat soluble vitamins with a teaspoon, maybe even a tablespoon of olive oil, for example. I haven't quite got to the point. I don't like sucking down oil of any kind. Like I'll drizzle some over my salad or, cook my veggies, do a little bit of olive oil, garlic, Parmesan, things like that. But I'm not just taking, I don't know, just haven't got to that point. I'm about, I don't know. For me, it hasn't been enjoyable to take spoonfuls of oil. It just seems a little weird, but try to incorporate when you take these vitamins with the other fat soluble vitamins. That's just what I'm saying, right? And you could throw in, right, the fish oils too, because they are also fat soluble. So loves like, right? This is science, basic science for you. And the Opposites, like, for example, the water-based or non-fat soluble, they won't go together as well during the absorptive phase. So more than 50% currently of the human population have insufficient vitamin D. And here in the US and farther north, there's likely more than 70%. Those with more natural melanin in their skin, those that have darker skin naturally, or that are diabetics, or who are obese, have poor, or who have a poor health status, or who smoke, also have an increased risk of being deficient. In fact, that's one of the things that could be a precursor to getting diabetes, is having a low vitamin D. So another reason to get your vitamin D levels up. And how do you know? You got to check under the hood. Yet it's not only adults who are deficient. Recently reported in the scientific journal Pediatrics, up to 70% of children are also low in this crucial vitamin. Lower levels of vitamin D have also been linked to increased risk of infection, including COVID-19, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and even depression. Vitamin D is crucial for hundreds of reactions in the body and has been linked to the regulation of between 100 and 1,250 genes. If you're deficient, simply taking the small amount contained in your multivitamin may not be enough to replenish it. As I mentioned, my goal is first food and foremost to get mine from food and from daily sun exposure, depending on the season and where I am in the world. I also try to eat vitamin D rich foods like fatty fish, wild caught fish like ahi or tuna, eggs as well, and yogurt. In winter, I often need a supplement as well. In choosing my supplements, I make sure to use the active form, which is vitamin D3, and check my levels every couple of months or so. And if you're going to start a new regimen because you have gotten your D3 levels checked, and I would say a minimum sort of optimal level would be around 60. I shoot for about 70, even though the lab will tell you normal is anything over 25 or 30. In this day and age, folks, I hope you've gotten this message by now. You do not want to be normal. Normal is not optimal. Normal means you are potentially insulin resistant, you are overweight, you are craving, you are not feeling your best self, you are inflamed. Normal is not what we want. We want optimal. So for vitamin D, I suggest we want optimal levels, which is above 60 or 70, which is a good place to shoot for. Make sure you supplement with the active form, which is vitamin D3 or cholecalciferol, and look for a maintenance dose around 2,000 international units, which is equivalent to about 50 micrograms. Please note that you may need a much higher dose, 5,000, even up to 10,000 international units, to get your levels to a healthy number if you've been deficient for several months. And so starting first with a little check under the hood, you gotta get those levels checked. And then you might want to recheck them about every 3 months or so. It's a great idea to check your current 25-hydroxy vitamin D levels for reference, and then again in 2 months or 3 months or so after supplementing to see where you are and adjust accordingly with the help of your provider. Not only will repleting your vitamin D help your immune function, but also likely elevate your mood. Wow, who doesn't need that these days? Heck, I love a good mood boosting anything. And having your vitamins intact and optimal, that's going to be a big help. So your vitamin D can help your immune function, also elevate your mood, decrease insulin resistance, and reduce your risk of many chronic inflammatory diseases, such as heart disease, autoimmune disease, like multiple sclerosis, and even cancer. Furthermore, you might notice that replenishing your vitamin D may even help you to lose weight. What? Increasing your vitamin D can help you lose weight? Yeah. In a double-blind, prospective, randomized trial reported in the International Journal of Preventive Medicine, they found that after 6 weeks of vitamin D supplementation, that's less than 2 months, in 6 weeks of vitamin D supplementation in the intervention group, they had significant weight loss, in addition to significant decreases in the waist and hip circumference and BMI compared to the control group that did not have the supplemental vitamin D. All other things being equal. So vitamin D, again, for the win. All right. I'm gonna go on just a little bit more into my favorite mineral, which is magnesium. And following that in the book, I talk all about the omega-3s, which are, of course, the EPA and the DHA. And I'm not going to get into that section because I shared with you a pretty cool podcast just a couple of weeks ago on the omega-3s. So I'm going to refer you back to that. But let's round it out with my favorite mineral, the mighty magnesium, which we should all look for in a supplement. Here we go. Magnesium is my favorite mineral. It's both mighty and magnificent in so many ways. It does so much for the body. It is involved in over 600 reactions and is important for optimal body and brain health. In fact, it is necessary to make the energy or ATP in our body every moment we are alive, which is vital to metabolism and life. Without magnesium, we would likely be devoid of energy and die. Sadly, according to the medical journal, the American Family Physician, up to 75% of us are not getting the recommended amount in our daily diet. Also, it is often not included in adequate amounts in a multivitamin. And this is kind of for obvious reasons, because the amount we need couldn't fit into a tiny little multivitamin pill. Like magnesium, when you're getting sufficient amounts, it's a little bit bulky. It would make for a super large horse pill. Even my own multivitamin doesn't have sufficient magnesium with it. And I love my multivitamin, but I do also take additional magnesium. So as a result, I generally encourage people to take a separate magnesium supplement. Low magnesium has been linked not only to muscle and bone problems, but also increased risk of depression and mood, anxiety problems, poor sleep, elevated blood pressure, low energy, not surprising given its crucial importance in making ATP, diabetes and insulin resistance, as well as an irregular heartbeat and asthma progression. Magnesium is easy to replenish with supplementation. So if you haven't gotten the little hint, magnesium is super important. And I did a whole 1 or 2 podcasts previously on magnesium because it's so darn important. I've had a lot of experience with this for myself because I've suffered from some of these things, including poor sleep, including bad migraine headaches. And magnesium was the game changer in both of these. It helps me so much to be able to sleep well at night. It has basically eliminated, for the most part, most of my migraines. I get them rarely with stress and things like that, or poor sleep and so on, that happen from time to time. But it has made a significant impact. Also with my daughter and her diabetes, making sure she's getting adequate magnesium has been crucial. And I've had several kids with asthma. And interestingly enough, those that know this, that maybe have worked in a hospital, one of the treatments we give folks, both who come in, for terrible, worse, these terrible migraines, we give them an infusion, an IV infusion of magnesium. Also for really, tight asthmatics, as we say, tight meaning their airways are really tight and they can't breathe well, and it's like breathing through a straw. Magnesium helps relax their airways, helps them breathe better. We give that in an infusion, in an IV form in the hospital. How much better would it be if we just got sufficient of it in our diet? Then we wouldn't maybe potentially even need to go to the hospital. I know for me, it's been life-changing as far as my migraines, for example, and I supplement with additional magnesium. Magnesium is easy to replenish with supplementation. Some foods also do contain magnesium, like certain nuts and seeds, especially almonds, pumpkin seeds, and peanuts, although you would have to consume about 1/2 to 3/4 of a pound daily to get the necessary amount. That's a lot of nuts. I love nuts, but I'm not going to eat that many each and every day. So I supplement with magnesium. Now, I urge you to not grab the least expensive, poorly absorbed forms like magnesium oxide, magnesium gluconate, magnesium carbonate, and magnesium sulfate. They tend to go right through the GI tract, causing, you guessed it, diarrhea, rather than actually replenishing your stores. Magnesium sulfate or Epsom salt is often used in bath water to soothe the muscles, but it is not awesome as an oral supplement, as it has both an unpleasant taste and smell, poorly absorbed, and you guessed it, can often cause diarrhea. There are many great forms, however, that are highly recommendable. These include magnesium threonate, which is my personal favorite, as it enters the brain more easily by crossing the brain-blood barrier and can help with headaches, mood, and sleep. Magnesium glycinate, also absorbed well from the GI tract and tends to have fewer side effects like diarrhea. And another example, magnesium orotate, which can maybe improve some of these heart dysrhythmias, or magnesium citrate, often used to help those folks with constipation. Magnesium lactate is also fairly well absorbed and gentler on the GI tract. And magnesium malate which is easily absorbed and has been shown to be helpful with those with fibromyalgia. So there's a lot of choices out there. If you're feeling overwhelmed, don't be. It's actually pretty simple. Feel free to message me. I'd be happy to share with you what I take, because this could seem like a lot to remember. But if you just had one or two choices, here you go. I'd stick to either magnesium glycinate or magnesium threonate, because both are easily absorbed and work well from my experience. The mighty mineral magnesium. So I'm going to leave the omega-3s for you all to just go back and re-listen to. I do talk about them in my book. And if you don't have it, you got to go get that thing, because you know what? It may not be available tomorrow. It's already been taken down. It was, we were ghosted off of Amazon for several weeks. It was gone, not available. Maybe they just weren't ready for us, but it is back. It is available. You should grab your copy now. That would tickle me if you did. And then tag me, then dropped a review on Amazon. I'd love to hear what you're learning, what you're loving. And I hope that you found this little podcast that we just shared, talking a little bit about some of these high impact supplements, like an importantly well-made multivitamin, not just anything you find on the shelves of that vitamin store, because sadly, many of them, in fact, the majority I've seen in my experience, don't have the bioavailable forms of the nutrients that we desire. And often they have crap in there. They might have sugar, they might have an artificial sweetener. I mean, I didn't even get into this, but most kids' chewies and gummies, they either have sugar or fructose or crap like sucralose, an artificial sweetener. Like, what in the world? What message are we giving? So you got to read the label. Like with anything, you got to make sure they have good manufacturing processes, like we talked about in the podcast last week, that they're using well-sourced ingredients. No offense, but I'm personally not buying any supplements that come from China. I'm just not. Just one of those things. But you got to have well-sourced ingredients. You got to have the active form, if at all possible. And if there's data to back it and support it, like the peer-reviewed data that is available on chromium, for example, that I was sharing with you about, that is in this beautiful little happy juice, the pink drink, that has been something helpful to me, to many people, for blood sugar balance, including my daughter who has diabetes. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. And if you need a little bit more guidance, you want to ask me questions, feel free to do so. We're on Insta, Facebook. I'd be happy to help. But until next time, thank you and aloha. Thanks for watching, and remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you never miss out. Aloha.